It's time for the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I have a great show lined up for you today, guys. In the studio with me is Dan Rivers. Dan, you've got a really interesting background. We're going to talk a lot today about how you're helping people optimize short-term rentals through your company. So I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of background on yourself, your company first, and kind of what led you to this point. And really, for those listening, we're going to dive into the short-term rental market because there's some real challenges that people are facing as it relates to whether or not their investment is profitable, which at the end of the day is what we're here to discuss, is how do we drive profit. We'll talk a little bit more about the STR market in general. A little later on in the program, we're going to have Derek Goulette with Fairway Independent Mortgage talk about the financing side of the real estate market. We've got some good news and some updates to provide for you there. And we're going to talk about the market in general over the course of the next hour. So that's what we have planned here on the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. So Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. For those that are listening, you've never been on the show before, but you're a well-known name in the community. So what have you kind of done up to this point that has now led you to your current business endeavor?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. I like to tell everybody, first and foremost, used to just say girl dad, but now I have a young son, so I'm a dad and husband first. I think that's the most important thing to me in travel. But I've been in real estate kind of in a few different areas, Tampa and Boston since 2005. Used to do large-scale property management for HOAs, put budgets together, do contracts, etc. And did that for about 12, 13 years. My wife and I moved down here to Charleston, South Carolina in 2018. Absolutely fell in love. And now starting to raise a family down here. And got into the real estate sales side of things, real estate investing quickly. Being just in the right rooms around the right people is very important.
Right. And
it just opened up my eyes to a new way of living life, not necessarily trading time for money, but trading value for money, including investing properly so you can have passive money coming in. And that ultimately led me to Synergy Stays, a short-term rental revenue management optimization company where we can help people just increase their revenue to hit their passive revenue goals so they can live whatever their why is and whatever their life they want to live.
Awesome. So Synergy Stays. Let's talk about this company a little bit, right? So for those of you that own short-term rentals or that are thinking about buying a short-term rental, there are two incredibly important components to managing that asset profitably,
correct,
efficiently, effectively. Mm-hmm. What are those two things that you see people really focus on? What are those two kind of main categories or pillars that lead to a successful short-term rental?
Yeah, 100%. I think a couple years ago, you get in short-term rentals, 2020, 2021, 2022, and people were, just making money left and right. All you had to do was pull one up on Airbnb, VRBO, and you're making money. They realize now over the last few years, it is a separate business. So every investment tool, whether it's long-term, mid-term, short-term rentals, it is its own business, its own asset class. And it's really important to treat it as such. So for a short-term rental, to me, I treat it as a business. It's the hospitality/experience side, and then it's the revenue management optimization side. And they're two separate skill sets, two separate businesses that need to join together as one to be able to maximize revenue and the guest experience. So if you don't treat it that way, if you just want to, buy a house, don't really do your analysis to make sure it's the right house, the right location, the right amenities, and you just want to throw it up on Airbnb and try to make some revenue, well, those are the people who are really struggling.
Right.
It's not when you treat it as a business and you make sure whether you handle the hospitality and experience side, or you hire someone for that, or you handle the revenue side, or you hire someone for that, it's important to treat them as two separate businesses, and that's where I've seen the most success come from investors right now in this market.
I think a lot of people are looking for that right place to park their money right now, mm-hmm. right? Stock market's volatile, to say the least. Real estate seems like the safer play, but with rates being where they are, it's challenging to just buy a property, stick a long-term tenant in it, and have it be a profitable venture. So I think it's more important now than ever to look at something like a short-term rental through that lens, right? The revenue management and generation side of it, and then the hospitality side of it, right? Are you creating a experience? Are you going to get repeat stays from the people that go and look at that property? I've had an STR for years and years and years downtown, and we have people that come every year, which is really cool. It's almost like a book of business, right, that starts to compound off itself. But taking it just a quick step back, again, we're talking with Dan Rivers with Synergy Stays. Let's talk just a little bit about the market for short-term rentals, because I know you're a data-driven guy, as am I. I actually did a show on the program a few months ago where we were talking about the challenges that I saw in the short-term rental market, whether it was things like occupancy rates being down or just more properties being on the market, right? Market saturation, or the fact that you have all these folks that maybe purchased the property a few years ago with some creative component to the financing that might be in line for refinancing or an adjustment in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the data suggests that there's over $300 billion in debt that will be restructured by the end of the year for folks that got like interest-only loans or DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio loans. Or maybe they took money from one property to buy the other, and now they need to do some collateralization or figure something out. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to see an increase in the cost associated with owning and maintaining that asset, in addition to all the other increases we've seen in operational expenses, the taxes, the insurance, the cleaning fees, all of it. Mm-hmm. So what are you seeing in the market? And I guess let's talk more specifically about how you're using those data points to benefit your clientele.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I mean, you're seeing it all over. Occupancy has dipped, but it's actually very unique. So I just pulled this data the other day, and 50% of bookings used to be booked between 14 days and 90 days. Now we're seeing that 70% of bookings are booked either 14 days or sooner or 90 days out. So that middle window has shrunk about 25%. And that's drastic, and that's important when you're trying to run a business, as I mentioned, because let's just say you're using your data from last year. A lot of people use past year's data to make informed decisions this year, which is fine. You can use that, but you still have to look at comp sets in your market. You really have to do a deep dive into this. And if you're analyzing that and you say, hey, last year I was booked at this rate by this time, and we're 30 days out and I'm not booked yet, it's very easy for people to become reactive, make reactionary decisions, and they're going to just lower the price and not understand what they're doing. And then they're going to, in turn, maybe their occupancy goes up, but their revenue is going to be down. And ultimately what's called RevPAR, revenue per available room, is going to be off, and their gross revenue is going to be off. Now, one of the strategies that I give to anybody that asks me is, right now, booking windows have compressed, as I just mentioned. So when you're 2-3 weeks out, instead of reacting, really take a look at your market. You look at the market usually books out maybe 90%. The market's currently booked out 40%. My comp set shows that there's only a few other units that are similar to mine. I can hold that ADR a little bit longer, average daily rate, a little bit longer to maximize my revenue versus making a react decision and lowering that. Or you may see, hey, you do have to make that move. The only way to fight against this, combat against this, is to lower that rate. But there are strategies to do longer term out, like length of stay discounts and a lot of other strategies where you can hopefully not be put in this situation too often. That's why it's important to treat it as that business and understand it.
I think education and expectations are so important in just any business relationship, right? And so there are plenty of parallels that I could draw between what you're doing in the management of a short-term rental and looking at it on a daily basis, and then comparing that to a real estate agent that has someone's home for sale and looking at it through the lens of the owner. They see that the property's been on the market for, pick a period of time, 2 weeks, 2 months. They start having questions about whether they're positioned correctly, or whether the price is too high, or whether their agent just has their feet kicked up on the desk and they're waiting for someone to go to Zillow to call an agent to show the property. There's so many different things there. How do you, let's pretend for a moment that I'm an onboarding client of yours. What are some of the things that you guys go through, discuss, and then agree upon, so that if someone's listening and they have a short-term rental, what is it they can expect? And how do you educate them along the way?
Yeah. So first of all, as one of our clients, our main goal is not only to be the best revenue manager, but also to just give a great customer experience and make sure that we're as transparent as we can be. But one of the first things that we look at for a client that's onboarding, you come to me, is, hey, I'm priced well. I'm looking at my comp sets on, Airbnb, whatever the case is, and they'll come to us and say, I don't know why I'm not renting. Joe Schmo down the street is. One of the biggest things that we see is search rankings being the issue for our customers. So they'll come in and they'll be like, I'm priced well, I don't know what's going on, and we'll look at them and they're on page 8, 9, 10 of Airbnb. No matter how well you price yourself, when was the last time anybody's gone to page 8, 9, and 10 and booked an Airbnb?
Right.
Probably never. So it's just educating them on, this is how we look at it. We're looking at your search rankings. We're going to, really focus on this and get that to page 1 or 2 as fast as possible by a lot of different tips and tricks to be able to do that. At that point, velocity usually starts to pick up, and then that's when we could start really diving deep into the market, the property, its comp sets, and then what type of adjustments we have to do from there to keep that velocity going and keep the occupancy high. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, but I want to continue this conversation. We're with Dan Rivers of Synergy Stays. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. If you want to get a hold of Dan, we're going to put a link to his company on our website, listingsincharleston.com. And you can always call the show that's dedicated, or the number that's dedicated to the show, which is 843-800-0065. I'm here with Dan Rivers of Synergy Stays. We're talking about the short-term rental market, and we've already covered kind of a lot of ground so far with regard to kind of like your background and your story, and why you love Charleston and why you run a business here. And we talked a little bit as well about just the state of the market, especially as it relates to short-term rentals. We haven't even touched on things like the changes that North Charleston just made as an example, and all these municipalities that have their own way of governing how short-term rentals are going to be done, right? Or imposing limits, or there's just so much that you have to keep up with. What I want to talk about for a second, though, Dan, is there are about as, well, not as many, but there are a ton of property management companies out there. And I think a lot of people are of the opinion that they just hand over the property to the property management company, and it's an all-in-one, done-for-you service. But when you get in there and you do your due diligence and you look at the property and how it's ranking, you realize there are some pretty big gaps or opportunities for improvement. We'll put it that way. And obviously there are a bunch of parallels that I could draw with my own business and folks that maybe list with a friend that doesn't quite have a lot of experience, or just isn't in it full time, or maybe they just don't have, whatever the case might be, right? There are 8,000 agents in our market. Mm-hmm. And what was the statistic you mentioned off air?
It was like 70% have done one or less deals.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure the property management's the same way, in that people think, hey, I'm just going to hand this over to this company and all would be taken care of for me. I'd love to just hear from your perspective the difference between, I guess, what a typical management company will do versus what your company specifically does, and how you rank so well with what it is you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I want to say there are some, like we were just talking about, there are some great full service property management companies out there for short-term rentals. Absolutely 100%. Doesn't mean the majority are, but there are some great players out there. And honestly, we work with quite a few property management companies to help bring that added level of revenue management for them. So like, we're very friendly with the great ones. It's the ones that have the mindset of, we are really great at the experience and the hospitality side, but we can use some help on the revenue side, because we want to make sure our clients are getting the utmost best service. So I love those types of property managers that are open, humble, and realize, I'm good in one area, you're good in the other, let's partner up. So I think one of the biggest differences, like you said, that make us stand out is, again, we treat it as, we focus on one area. We used to do full service property management for short-term rentals. And then we realized what we were really great at was the revenue management side. So we put the other side to rest, and we said, we're going to double down. And just like anything in life, if you commit to one specific thing and you commit to be great at it, and you're in the rooms with, we're in masterminds with other revenue managers throughout the country. And we could do, by the way, revenue management anywhere in the world. We have Mexico, all over the United States. So it's something that we can do anywhere. We put ourselves in the right rooms. We learn from the best so that we can provide the utmost best service. And people will tell you, hey, I can give you the best service. And I'm not going to say that Are we number 1 or number 5? Doesn't matter. We give the best service and then we give the best customer experience. And that's what we focus on. And that's what makes us stand apart is we focus on one area, get really great at it, and go crush it. Yeah.
I love that. And I got to say, as somebody that's lived in Charleston for over 20 years, I've noticed personally, I don't know if you have as well, but it seems like customer service has really gone by the wayside over the past few years. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if it's a real estate company or checking out at the grocery store. I mean, it just seems like across the board, customer service has gone down, not up. It's not as much of a focus as I think it should be or used to be. So it's great to hear that someone's so focused on the experience, because with that, and truly with that, has to come accountability, right? You
Correct.
Cannot have trust without accountability. There has to be well, if I talk the talk but don't walk the walk, here are the options, right? There's same thing with me and my real estate business, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we're not performing, if we're not doing what we say we're going to do, people have the right to cancel their agreement at any time, which means that we have to continuously earn their business, not just give a good sales pitch. Mm-hmm. So in line with that, let's say somebody does hire your company on the revenue management side. What are some of the things you guys talk about and do and focus on? Like, what is that experience?
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of mentioned that too, because people will come to me as like, we're not the cheapest and we're not trying to be the cheapest, because guess what? If we are the cheapest company, we're hooking you up to a tech and that's it. And you can just honestly get Price Labs Beyond Pricing Wheelhouse and just pretty much do the basic stuff yourself. We are in a sweet spot. We're affordable. We're a very good, price for people, but we care about having a strategic, tactical strategy for your specific property and market. That is the utmost important for us, and that's how we're going to be successful. What I always tell people as well is I'm not going to come in here and tell you, hey, Brian, by the way, I can make you another $20,000, $30,000 and just, blow smoke at you and just say, hey, this is what I can do. What I'm going to say is we're going to take your property in, we're going to analyze it against the market comp sets. We're going to give you tips and tricks that you can do on your end to maximize your property. We are going to in-house do everything on our end to maximize the revenue, and our goal is to get you the top 10% or better of your market. Now, if your market's shifting, which a lot of them are, the average RevPAR nationwide was down 9%, I think in June, something around those lines. Our clients are up 23%. So that's a 30% swing in RevPAR, because our goal is just to be at the top of the market. That may be you lose 1% you're down 1% from last year, but your market's down 10% from last year. So you're still up 9% compared to your market. That is what I promise people. I promise you we probably will make a mistake at some point. We're not perfect, but I promise you we will be accountable, show humility, give a great customer experience, and we strive to just be great at understanding your market, your comp set, and maximizing your revenue. That's my promise to people, because just like in real estate, what are you going to sell my house for? Well, here's where I got the comp set at, here's how I'm going to market, here's how I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to tell you a specific number because it's market specific and we got to see what that market's going to handle, right? I mean, I'm sure that's what you do on your side. It's not an exact number, but here's everything I'm going to do to get you the highest number.
I think it's important to provide people with, again, clarity through information that's shared based on like a lot of experience. It's nice to work with somebody that actually really understands what they're talking about and not just is good at looking at today's data and drawing conclusions from it, but also being so connected with their space that they can give you a heads up on the trends that are forming in that space so that you can kind of use those predictions to position yourself successfully. I mean, that's what anybody that works with a really high caliber real estate agent should experience is here's what's happening. In 3 months from now, when the data proves it, it will become public data and news and a general understanding of the market, but it's happening. Here are the reasons why. And so I love the fact that you are so involved in, I guess, the analytics of how they're positioned. And what's interesting is you talk about this incredible increase in revenue that you're able to generate for people. Is a lot of it just the way in which the property is being marketed? I mean, is it like photos? Is it description? Is it like outbound marketing to drive traffic to that property? I mean, what are kind of some of the things that people just swing and miss on that causes them to be on page 8, page 9, page 10 that just aren't getting the bookings?
Yeah, a few of the things one of the things is outside of our control, but we'll give a lot of advice is obviously your ratings. You want to be 4.8, 4.9 or better. because your rating is going to directly correlate to that. But Airbnb, VRBO not as much, but Airbnb has a lot of algorithms, and they're always adjusting their algorithms. So it's understanding those adjustments as best as we can. We're not tapped into Airbnb, but my partner, who's been doing this since 2015, and our revenue manager also been doing it about 11 years. They've been doing this a long time, pretty much from the start, way before revenue management was even a thing people were talking about. They've been doing revenue management, or at least in the short-term rental game. But it's understanding the levers to pull, the adjustments to do, to fall as high up in that algorithm so that as many people see the property as possible, and that's going to ultimately drive revenue. And that is always adjusting, always shifting. That's why we focus 100% on that, because we're always learning. It's not always the same thing. Like Airbnb just made a very big adjustment where the looser your cancellation policy restrictions are, the better you're going to show up in the algorithm. So if you're very strict, we just sent out a notice to all our clients. Not that we want to get you from strict to, super loose.
The Wild West.
Yeah, but you can go from strict to maybe slightly firm, and it'll still help your algorithm a little bit for that, as well as length of stay discount. There's a lot of different things I could talk about as far as like the tools of the trade, but it's all about just understanding the algorithm and how to use it in your favor, and that's where you're going to be able to stand out.
Yeah, and again, same thing in residential real estate. It's not just being everywhere somebody is looking, right? Because that happens almost automatically. You put the property in the MLS, it syndicates to every website known to man, and then you've got all these billboards online that people can go to. Doesn't necessarily mean that someone goes to Zillow and they can get connected to me, because a lot of these companies are for profit, and not to go down that whole rabbit hole, but it's not just the ability to have exposure, it's the understanding of how people are finding these types of properties, understanding things like algorithms, and staying ahead of the curve.
And using, I like to say this too, like AI is a big thing everybody's talking about, and you could talk about a lot of different ways you can utilize AI and what that means, but using the technology we have at our hands to be able to deliver that great service without solely depending on it, and that's all that's used. And I think that's, especially in our industry, that's extremely important. Like, we want people making decisions, but based on information we're getting from our pricing tools, our search ranking tools, and maybe using some automations and stuff. But at the end of the day, I like to say, there's a scientific strategy and then there's an art to it. And you need to utilize both to max it. If you just use the scientific and the tech part of things, you'll do okay, but most people are doing that. You also need to be the artist.
I love that. Yeah. That's awesome. Any final thoughts or anything that we didn't cover that you think is important for folks to know?
No, I think, I'll say one thing is, if you're looking to get in the short-term rental market anywhere in the country or outside of the country, treat it as you're doing any other purchase, any other investment purchase. You would get a home inspection, right? You get a CL 100 down here. We also offer a market analysis for a market that you're going into, so that you don't go and think you're going to make 120 grand in a market and you're really going to make 80 because you're just misunderstanding the market. You saw one comp that was at the top of the market. So if you want to buy a short-term rental, don't be afraid to get in the game. Treat it as a business, but then also treat your purchase as an investment, and make sure that you have as much informed information in front of you so that you can make a good decision on that investment.
And I think it's important to align yourself with people that can provide you with that information, because you can get it to an extent. A lot of these websites offer, data points, but it's the understanding of those data points and how to take advantage of it that really matters.
100%.
How do folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
It's www.synergystayslocal.com. Again, that's synergystayslocal.com. Or you could reach out to me. It's Dan@synergystayslocal.com.
Awesome. Dan, it's been great having you. Dan Rivers with Synergy Stays. Thanks for being on the show, man. I think maybe we might have you back on to talk about maybe just the entrepreneurship side of things.
I love
that. We'll get real for a little while about what it's like owning a business or multiple businesses in this market, how to stay ahead of the curve, how to be a great leader, and how to separate yourself from the pack as one of the great companies that people are drawn to. So I'd love to have you back on for that.
I would love to talk about that. Yeah, that's a passion of mine. So I'm in.
Me too.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. When we come back, we've got Derek Goulette of Fairway Independent Mortgage. That's going to help us understand what's going on with interest rates, mortgages, and the like. So stick around. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. Welcome back, folks, as the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. So today's really just all about having guests onto the show to offer some differing opinions. Maybe you guys are sick of hearing me every week in and out for the past 13 years, but this is not a fresh face to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. This is a repeat guest. You guys have heard him before. This is Derek Goulette with Fairway Independent Mortgage. Good morning.
Brian, thanks. How you doing today?
Fantastic. All right, so Derek is our go-to lender on our team. He does an incredible job with our clients, whether it's a first-time buyer, a luxury property, looking at refinancing, looking at something to invest in. I mean, really, you're a wealth of knowledge, and so I appreciate you being on the program today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I think what's interesting about bringing you onto the program is that you get a little bit of a different side of the story, we'll say, when you're talking to folks about the market, quote unquote, right?
Yep.
You're just privy to conversations that I'm not privy to. It's not like I'm on the phone with you as you're collecting data and answering questions from folks to determine whether they're qualified for a loan or not.
Correct.
So as a result of that, you get to hear different things at times than what I hear as someone that's going to facilitate the process and so on and so forth. So, everybody always asks me, how's the market, right? Such a broad question. You could go in a million different directions. I'm not going to ask the same of you. What I'm going to ask is, when you're talking with folks that are in a home buying mindset, right? They're ready to buy a house. They're just looking for the right one. We have all heard ad nauseum at this point about interest rates and how interest rates coming down is the saving grace that our market is waiting for to really kick us back off to where we were a few years ago. I'm curious to know from your from your side of the table, what are some things that you're hearing and learning about as you're having conversations with folks about their perception of the market, and I guess from their perspective, what needs to happen for them to be excited about the process? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, super interesting question that I get a lot of questions in this regard, which kind of you just alluded to. And so I want to start with, I don't necessarily know that rates coming down the little bit they already have, but even in the broader sense of, like, let's just say we had a 1% drop tomorrow. I don't know that that's the silver bullet that everyone thinks it is. I think that buyers are way more picky in today's market than they ever have been. And so I think what it will do is cause the right house at the right price to sell more quickly than it currently already is, and maybe have a little bit less of this, like, seller concessions that are needed to sell houses in today's market. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's the silver bullet that everyone thinks it is. I think the thing that would maybe get people, quote unquote, super excited about the market again is a massive reduction, which I don't think we're going to see, at least for the foreseeable future. And by massive reduction, I mean, like, if we went from the high sixes we are today to the high fours, yeah, we would be pandemonium, and everyone in our two worlds respectively would be busier than they know what to do with.
Right.
But short of that, and I don't think we're getting there, there's not a lot that, quote unquote, excites people right now. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I think really when you take a step back and you look at what has happened to the market over the past several years, because we've been talking about the market adjusting for quite a while on this show. And that's one of the great, hopefully, reasons why people listen to the show, is that as somebody that not only brings in guests of different pillars in the real estate world, but as somebody that just stays in tune with the market at an expert level so I can deliver this kind of information, you guys get to hear essentially what's going to happen in the market before the data proves it, right? That's what happens when you work with a really, I think, high caliber industry professional, right? Is they can give you an idea of what the undercurrent is right now, and then how that will show up in the form of data later that people can then rely on confidently. So we try to give people a leg up on the competition. But when you say that buyers, there's really not much that excites buyers about the process right now, I just want to maybe focus on that for a quick second, because we went from, I guess, an environment where people would look at a house and say, well, why not, right? Like, why not buy this house at a 2.75% interest rate, right? We can buy a bigger, better home than what we have now, and with the equity we've earned, actually pay less per month, right? And obviously that's shifted a lot. And so now over half of the transactions we have include closing costs, right? Sellers paying a portion of the buyer's closing costs. In fact, the average is $8,000 on almost 6 out of 10 transactions right now, across the board, in any price point. Obviously, that's all averaged out. But you also mentioned that people are going to buy the right house at the right price. But what we have learned over the course of the past several months is that we have to not only truly understand the market and the direction of the market, but we have to be creative. And that's something that sometimes sellers are struggling with, is just the very thought that they have to be creative about enticing a buyer over to their property. Because for several years it was, which offer is best?
Correct.
Now it's, how do we get an offer?
Yeah. And I think that the I alluded to it, or I said it directly, like the right house at the right price today still sells. But it still sells partly because of concessions. And the reason that concessions are such a big deal is, you think about it, in our marketplace, I would say 8 out of 10 transactions are financing more than 80% of their purchase price. Mm-hmm. So cash is not abundant, especially as prices have risen. But when you think about it, closing costs are always dollar for dollar. And so if somebody's financing 95% of their purchase price, so on a $400,000 house, they're only bringing 20 grand to the table. But if that $8,000 meant that they had to bring 28 grand to the table and they only have 20, they're not buying that house. So that's the one differentiator in today's market that moves the needle the most, is that willingness of a seller to offer concessions. I can't tell you how many deals have blown up over something as little as $2,500, and you're like, man, how can a deal blow up over $2,500? But it does, because that's what has occurred in our marketplace right now.
Yeah, I've had deals blow up for all kinds of crazy reasons. I've had loose toilets. I had one where a deal didn't go through because of a loose toilet. One because the ceiling fan was wobbly. I mean, I could name them off. That's kind of what you get when you do, 1,500 transactions. I don't know how many loans you've done, but it's got to be way up there.
Yeah.
I'll never say that I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot.
Yes, true. Very true.
So, how do you just kind of see the market in general right now as it relates to rates, and what are some of those creative solutions that people are now taking into consideration to get them over the hump, to get that offer from the buyer? Because we're, again, kind of in the situation now where, as the market is slowing down, more and more properties are hitting the market and staying on the market. It's just adding to overall inventory, which is of course going to have an impact on demand and therefore price. So what are some of those creative solutions that you're seeing really working right now?
So the biggest thing really boils down to concessions and pricing your house right out of the gate, as opposed to overstretching. I can't tell you how many people come to me because they're like, hey, we have a house to sell, but we want to go buy today. And my word of advice to all of them is, hey, if you think your house is worth X, pick a number, 510, price it at $499 to move it if you want to go do this other thing. Secondly, we also have some tools that help people facilitate that gap to buy the house before they sell, which is another thing that's creating buyers, because if the right house pops up and they're not ready. But yeah, just sellers' flexibility is probably the biggest thing that is actually moving the needle, as opposed to not.
What are some of those, I want to hone in on that specifically. The person that wants to buy a house but needs to sell their home first.
Yep.
You mentioned some creative tools there.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we actually have probably 4 different ways to do it. And so most of them involve some sort of what we call a bridge finance. So a bridge loan, for people who don't know, just allows you to tap into the equity in your current house to utilize that for a down payment on the new house. Now, we're not going to let you use all of it, and chances are that if we get access to just enough of it, that you get your down payment that's minimum necessary to get into the new thing, then you can at least ride the storm out. So that's one option. And then another option is if you can't afford both payments, we have companies that will actually come partner with us, and they basically write a cash offer on your house that is a backup offer, but that allows us to omit the mortgage payment, thereby qualifying for a new house. And they will also advance part of the equity in the existing home so that you have the down payment for the new thing. And then once you sell, you kind of settle up, you pay either one of those, the bridge or that secondary financing that they put in place, off, and then you re-amortize your loan over what's left, or you hang on to the cash, depending on what you want to do.
You know, we talk a lot about this on this program, just creative ways of doing deals in real estate, right? Rather than the traditional, hey, I like your house, I want to buy it, but I have to sell my home first. And not just sell it, but I've got to go and hire an agent and list it and market it and get it under contract and close on it before I can buy your house, right? It's a lot to put the seller of that property through. There's some luck riding on that from their perspective, and they don't know the agent, they don't know the caliber of the agent, they don't know whether the price you're going to list your home at is actually what's going to cause it to sell. There's a lot riding on that first domino falling so that they can then actually sell their house, or that you have the ability to sell their house. So offering some of those creative solutions is huge. We just did that on a new construction deal where a separate entity purchased the property for our client, the buyer, which then allowed them to sell their home on their own time, use that equity to then buy the property back from the company that bought it for them so that they can then transition into the new home.
Yeah.
And there are fees associated with this, right? Any company out there is going to have to make money in order to offer that flexibility.
We're kind of doing that same thing, just in reverse order. And I think it gives the buyer a little more flexibility, because then they get into the house that they want on the day that they want to, while they deal with selling over there.
I think it's a fantastic option. It's just, again, it's going to cost you a little bit. And there are a bunch of different kinds of programs out there, and a lot of different creative solutions for structuring these transactions, where you don't have just to do the traditional, hey, I want to buy your home, but I have to sell my home first, and you have to wait on me to do all of it. Yeah. Right.
Now, if the seller's not, in any rush,
yeah,
sometimes they're okay with it, but
exactly,
more often than not, they've got somewhere else to go. We just did one. There was 3 transactions riding on it, and had to go that route, and the people were moving to Texas, and and then those people were moving to Alabama, and those people were moving to Tennessee. So it was like this whole domino that couldn't wait for that, and it was the difference between our client winning that offer and not. So, yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back for the last few minutes of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show with our guest, Derek Goulette of Fairway Independent Mortgage. But before we go, just really quickly, how do folks get in touch with you if they have a question about qualifying for a purchase, refinancing, talking about an investment property, or the like?
Cell phone's always best. It's always on. I'm kind of weird about answering it. I've said that before. I'll say it again. Phone number is 949-280-8044.
Excellent. If you guys did not jot that down, we're going to put a link to Derek's company on our website, listingsincharleston.com, so you can get to him through that. Or you can always call the radio show number, which comes straight to me. You can call or text 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065. Brought you guys some guests today, some folks from my trusted network. Derek Goulette with Fairway Independent Mortgage offered some great insight into what he's experiencing on the lender side of the equation. And with just a little bit of time left, Derek, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about rates and like what that does and impact and what would excite people. So I would say that, one reminder right now is that I think there's more downward pressure than upward pressure as far as interest rates are concerned. And so, we talked about, would a drop in rates mean the silver bullet. It doesn't mean the silver bullet, but it does start to excite people. So I think that creating a little bit of urgency within yourself to like figure out what this looks like is probably a good first step or a good next step for a lot of people, whether they currently rent or they own right now and want to understand the mechanics of, what does it look like? But, kind of funny because I think about this because I hear it every week. But so the church I go to ends every service with, what's God saying to you and what are you going to do about it? So I kind of twist that a little bit to like say like, okay, what do we do with this now that we've heard all these things?
Right. I love that. That's a great way of looking at it. I think for the folks that are listening to this program that know that at some point in the not too distant future, maybe it's now, maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's a year from now, whatever the case may be, if you want to know where you're going, you have to know where you are now, right? Yep. So if you want to know what your home is worth, if you want to know what your options are as far as available properties, that's something obviously we can help you with. If you want to know what your buying power is, or if you just, and I encourage everybody to do this, and I know this sounds like realtor talk, but at the end of the day, how many conversations do you have with people that are preliminary in nature, that are nothing more than just to like set the stage for here's what we need to accomplish financially in order for you to get to where you want to be? I think if people can just have that introductory conversation and understand, all right, here's what my home is worth. Here's how much cash I have in my house. Here's my equity. Here's how I'm going to use that to then get to point B. How can I accomplish that goal now? Maybe without waiting for interest rates to come down. That's, I think, a really interesting conversation for people to have, because the reality is options exist that allow you to save pretty incredible amounts of money on the process.
Yeah.
Whether it's interest rate buy downs or, just all these different creative solutions that you and your team have. I think the first step is have the conversation, help people understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then rely on the team and the synergy that we have to provide you with that 5-star experience.
100%. You said, how many of these do I have? I legitimately have like between 3 and 5 of these preliminary conversations a day. It's not an application. It's a conversation of like, just before I got here, had a kid call me. He's like, hey, I think I want to buy a house. I don't know what to do. We talked for 25 minutes. Like, it's a conversation. Now he has some action steps, and we'll touch base in 3 months and kind of go from there. But like you said, it's that initial conversation to figure out where you are today and where you want to go, and then how do we get you from where you are today to where you want to go.
I think having a quality conversation with a quality group of people is so important, because the last thing you want is incomplete or incorrect advice. That's, correct. I think, really important to take into consideration. All right, well, we're out of time. Derek, thank you so much for being on the program again. We're going to have you on again soon. If folks want to get in touch with you, the best way to do that is
cell phone 949-280-8044.
Fantastic. And if you guys want to reach out to me or get him through me, listingsincharleston.com is the website, and you can call or text 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. We're always here to help. You guys have a great weekend.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.